Welcome or welcome back to Novel Idea. My name is Dia. Today I have the second installment of my favorite books from childhood. Again, I'm going to mention a few that my kids also really enjoy. We're moving kind of into the reading stage of childhood, and so I'm going to split this next one into two parts. We're going to have the early readers, and then we'll do more of the chapter books that don't really have pictures. So we're going to do early readers, which is more text and pictures still, and then we'll do the ones without pictures in part 2. All right, so let's get into it. So there's going to be some overlap, of course, because there always is, right? There's always overlap with what you read as a child and what you give to your children to read. So there'll be a little bit of overlap there, but for the most part, these were my favorites when I was little. And so the first ones are the Serendipity books. I would love to know how many of you from the late 70s, early 80s were reading Serendipity books by Stephen Cosgrove, illustrated by Robyn James, I believe. All of these books were a little bit like Aesop's fables. They all had a teaching to them. There was always something that somebody was overcoming or that they were finding challenging that had to be faced somehow. And they were just wonderful. I really loved the artwork. It was magical. I loved the stories. I read as many of them as I could get my hands on. Then we have the typical Frog and Toad. We have to mention Frog and Toad. Frog and Toad as friends were something that I aspired to be. No tea today. This is well, it is digestive tea, but it's like a kombucha kind of. It's called digestive tea. Apple and blackberry and ginger. Anyway, cheers. We also have Owl at Home. One of the things that I loved about Owl at Home was that he was a homebody. He was an introvert, but he always made whoever showed up at his door feel welcome and like they were somebody that he had been waiting for. And I just loved it. Then we also have Little Bear. Little Bear and Owl at Home were probably the two books that I read more than any others at that age. So that early onset of reading, Little Bear, and Little Bear has some other stories, but the original Little Bear and the original Owl at Home both were ones that I adored. Then we have The Little Prince. So The Little Prince I originally had read to me. I begged my mom for Christmas when I was 8 years old to buy me a copy of The Little Prince. I still have that copy. It is packed away. It's nice and safe, but it was treasured throughout my whole life. I have treasured that story and that book. I just love it. And then we have a few soup books. I still love soup. I still love to make soup. So we have Mouse Soup, and we have Stone Soup, and we have Strega Nona, who has a magical soup pot. I don't know why I gravitated toward them, but I did. I loved these 3 books. Then I have When I Was Young in the Mountains. And Cynthia Rylant has a ton of early readers. It's a story about a family and their life in the great outdoors. It's lovely. Of course, Winnie-the-Pooh. When I was about second grade, I would say, I was given a set of Winnie-the-Pooh books. I read them for years, just kind of on repeat. Then I have The 100 Dresses. This is such a good story for kids. It's just kind of a story of what happens as a result of some of this classist kind of mentality that this book deals with. Okay, then we have the Lorax. Now, most people think of Dr. Seuss books and they think of things like Green Eggs and Ham or Hop on Pop or The Foot Book or something like that. The Lorax is much more text dense, and it, to this day, excuse me, to this day, it is my favorite Dr. Seuss. And it's just about taking care of what our world has to offer us and not treating it as if it's all there for us, but that we are there for it as well. So, funny story, my oldest daughter, who has been in like public service jobs for a very long time. And she always makes sure when we go out to eat that she is communicating well with the waiters and waitresses, that she is asking questions about them and not just constant. Anyway, when the waiters come over to ask questions and they're like, "Are you guys ready to order yet?" My daughter is always the first one to speak up, and she says, maybe just a few more minutes. I don't think my dad's quite ready yet. Or, yeah, we had some questions about the specials, and, you know, or something like that. She's always the first one to speak up. And so we actually call her the Lorax because she speaks for the family instead of speaking for the trees like the Lorax does. I also have Uncle Remus. I loved Brer Rabbit and all of the antics and sarcasm and everything that was part of the Uncle Remus stories. All of our kids had in-womb names so that we didn't have to just call them the baby and that kind of stuff. And my youngest was baby Remus, to the point where even after she was born, her brother and sister still called her baby Remus for a while. Lastly, for my part, I have Daniel's Duck. And you want to talk about a sweet story. This is just absolutely precious. Right. For my kids, they said Linnea in Monet's Garden, which was a book that came out right about the time that my oldest had just really gotten into reading. And this is so beautifully illustrated. And it is basically a historical fiction. And it's just wonderful. My son's favorite books, which some people would call picture books, but I think because of the length of them and the amount of text and the smaller pictures and stuff, I would agree that these were first readers, and that is Curious George. I was never a fan of Curious George. I'm still not a fan of Curious George, but he loved them. When he started to finally read, these were always the first books that he reached for. my youngest had two that she really loved. One was the Billy and Blaze books, and one was Babar, the elephant. And she had a bind up of all the Babar books. And she literally would just pour over it. She loved Babar and Celeste. And so, yes. And then Billy and Blaze is about a boy and his horse, and just some different things that happen on their ranch, and the way that they take care of one another. And they're really wonderful. All right, Cynthia Rylant, who I mentioned about When I Was Young in the Mountains, was a favorite of my oldest daughter. And she wrote the Cobble Street Cousins books. And my oldest just loved these stories. The first three are the ones that I remember her reading the most. All of my kids, all of them, loved Shel Silverstein's The Giving Tree. And I think that's probably pretty much a given across the board for everyone. Everyone loves Shel Silverstein's The Giving Tree. My youngest really loved the Littles books. It's very similar to The Borrowers, but meant for a much younger audience. Also by Cynthia Rylant was The Lighthouse Family. And these kind of started to come out toward the end of when my youngest was kind of done with this age level of book, but it didn't stop her from making sure to read them all. Lastly, Grasshopper on the Road, which is so funny, and just the illustrations in it make it even funnier. My son, I can still hear his giggles about it when he was learning to read. So there you go, you guys. There are the first readers portion of our Getting Older kids books, and next will be just chapter books. Thanks for joining me today. I would love to know if you've read these, but I also want to know what some of your favorite first reader books were when you were little. All right, everybody, I'll see you again very soon with another video. Like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to.